Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another AP World video. Today, I'll be talking about mercantilism and the effect of exploration on Africa. So, to start, mercantilism is the policy of making sure that colonies of a mother country only traded with them, otherwise, they would have high tariffs placed on them. So, um, the mother country used high tariffs on foreign goods so that the colonies couldn't afford goods from the mother country. And the colonies didn't really mind this, and eventually it did come back to ends up hurting them economically when they became an independent country. So with that, I'll go into Africa, and you could start by seeing in Africa mercantilism did exist. So Caribbean islands, the Caribbean islands, which were colonies of Europe, um, sugarcane was started to produce in the Caribbean islands, and sugar was also one of the biggest causes of slavery, plantations, and the need for labor on these plantations. So, these populations, these these plantations were very productive, and they were able to create lots of sugarcane, which would be sent to Europe to be turned into sugar, which would be then sent back and sent around the world. So it was like a trade, and then it was a trade for a good that you can use to good make another good. So therefore, we go back to slavery, and in 1518, the first load of African slaves were brought to the Americas. Slavery had existed for centuries in Africa prior to the European contact, and Africans traded slaves. And the Portuguese and Spanish were the first Europeans to purchase these slaves in numbers at coastal trading ports. Slavery just grew and grew from here, and Europeans with slaves captured. The Europeans had slaves captured both inland and brought to the coast, and the slave trade caused a decline of some African societies as their populations were just getting stripped out and depopulated. And while some African societies rose in power, the acetate and rose in power and involvement in the slave trade. So we can see the acetate and the Dami became prosperous slave traders, and some African leaders such as like King Alfonso of Congo and the Alame of Futatoro. So they actually tried to prevent slavery because they saw these effects, but their efforts were unsuccessful as it was just growing so fast that it wasn't preventable. During the slave trade, it is estimated that 11 million slaves were brought to America from the 16th and 19th centuries, and this is also today known as diaspora. The Middle Passage, the passage that crossed Africa to the Americas, is known as the place where many slaves who were crossing died due to the poor conditions that cargo held. Up to 2 million people are estimated to have died, and that's led to from disease, starvation, and despair. And you can just see how truly cruel these traders were to these slaves, not only enslaving them to do work for them free of labor, which is the thought of it is bizarre, but to give such poor conditions across just when you're transporting them is just you can't really think about it today. Um, when we can see trade, we can see the triangular trade network was from the Africa, Americas, and Europe. And here we can see manufactured goods like guns, tools, and cloth were traded with African elites for African slaves. So this is really straight corruption. You were taking slaves and you were making the powerful become more powerful by giving them these weapons and giving them these luxury goods, and slaves were exchanged to the Americas with sugar, tobacco, and raw cotton. So slaves were thought of it think of slaves as like a good, like it's a person, it's a human being, and it is a good, which is considered. And we can see that slave trade allowed colonies in the Caribbean, Brazil, and the southeastern part of the North America to become huge economic successes by providing America's unpaid labor on tobacco, rice, and sugar plantations. The arrival of slaves in the Americas contributed to the development of strict race-based social hierarchies that led to the long-term suppression of both slaves and free people of African descent. Slaves also suffered from poor working and living conditions, which contributed to the high mortality rates in sugar and rice growing regions. Conditions were slightly better in the tobacco growing regions in the Chesapeake region. Finally, the end result in Africa is seen today. It kind of tore apart African society, creating conflict and war, which you can see today among the African people as they competed for the slave market. And the conflicts depopulated the African continent, brought into question African cultural values, and this caused their rapid deterioration. And the Songhai Empire weakened considerably due to this, which helped to strengthen the Moroccan dynasty that emerged in the latter of the 16th century and destroyed the empire of the Songhai. With all these changes, some things in Africa continued regardless. The traditional monarchical form of government remained highly centralized in most African kingdoms. Christianity remained constant in South Africa and Ethiopia, while Islam continued to spread throughout the remaining portions of Africa. In the end, the global impact of European exploration, one, interregional connections were solidified due to create a global truly economy, which we can see today. The economy is so connected. America does something. Say, just like the president was elected, this had effects all over the world, to the economy, to tariffs, to the taxes, and you can just see how globalized the world became due to this. And um, shift in trade dominance became uh became like definite as Europe became the center of the global market, and they were the global leaders for 400 years. And with that, that's basically all the effects of Africa and all the effects that happen on Africa and mercantilism. Thank you for watching.